This is Warren Vanderhill speaking with Burle Plank. Interview number 2, Muncie Jewish Oral History Project. Speaking with Mr. Plank in his home, February 22nd, 1979. Burle, I'd like to begin by asking you if you could tell me a little bit about your father, where he came from, how he happened to come to this country, a little bit about the mobility pattern, as it's usually called when historians talk about these things.
My father came to this country in 1912, and what brought him to this country, my mother had a sister that migrated from Russia to Bluffton, Indiana, with her husband. So she was responsible for him coming. So he settled in Bluffton, and my uncle was in a scrap business. Scrap business, junk business, whatever you call it. And naturally, he put him in that same type of a business. And he bought him a horse and wagon, and he went out to accumulate scrap. And when he came here, he left in Russia my mother and 5 children. And it was not very easy for him to make very much money. And besides, to become a citizen of this country, you gotta be here 5 years. First 5 years, you were able to get the first papers. So while it was difficult for him to do very much in the first 5 years, and then the war broke out, World War I. So it made it impossible then for him to bring us to this country.
So eventually then you came, but this would have been after World War I.
Right.
Were there any organizations, any Jewish organizations or non-Jewish organizations that helped you or your family as far as getting settled, or was it all done through relatives?
Well, you mean for our family to come over?
Right.
Yeah, as near as I can remember, my father migrated from Bluffton to Pennville, Indiana. He had a place of his own, and then he finally came to Montpelier, Indiana, where he finally settled with a business. And he got acquainted with a banker in Hartford City, where he was doing business. So I don't know how connection was made. And this banker knew Senator Watson. Oh, I'm sorry. There was a newspaper man from Marion, Indiana. His name was Everett Watkins. He was a Washington correspondent for the Indianapolis Star. So Mr. Watkins knew Senator Watson, and Senator Watson was instrumental in helping us. Through Senator Watson, there was a man by the name of Eli Sluss in Indianapolis that there were 2 brothers, Sluss Clothing Store. And later on, Mr. Sluss became the Morris plant of Indianapolis that's today.
Oh, yeah.
So he was instrumental working with Mr. Watson and Senator Watson and Everett Watkins. So I think that it helped my dad when he finally got his second papers, and after the war, it was very difficult to get out of Russia, because in Russia it was the revolution that happened, and it was something like in Iran, burned out everything, and it was quite a lot of starvation. But through their efforts, we were able to come to this country in 1922.
So in 1922, then, the family was united for the first time since the years before World War I.
Right.
And you were united in Bluffton?
In Montpelier.
By this time you were in Montpelier.
That's right. My dad was in Montpelier.
Now, did your dad live for the rest of his life in Montpelier?
Well, then my dad lived in Montpelier till we came to Muncie. My brother and I, we opened up a business here in 1929. And
it's a good year, 1929.
Yes. So my dad, of course, and mother, they were getting up in years, and we moved them to Muncie in 1935.
Was there any Jewish community to speak of? Or I guess I should be more specific and say, were there other Jews in Montpelier or Hartford City?
Yes. In Montpelier, there was two other Jewish families. A brother and sister that were married. You know, they had separate families. And then the brother, Mr. Stein and his family, they moved to Hartford City.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So there were just two families left, and later on, maybe 10 or 50 years later, the other family moved away. So then my dad was the only, my dad and mother were the only ones left there, and then we moved them out, and a Jewish family bought him out.
What did these other Jews do for a living?
Excuse me, the other two, they had clothing stores. Both of them had clothing stores. One was a higher grade store, men's clothing. Mostly, well, both of them had men's clothing, but one of them had work clothing, and the other was dress clothing.
Do you have any particular memories of what it was like for you as a younger man in this city?
In Montpelier?
First in Montpelier, and then later on when you came to Muncie.
Well, yes. When I came to this country, I was 14 years old. And going through the Russian Revolution and starvation that we went through there, I had no formal education. And I did have some Jewish tutoring when I was 5 or 6 years old. Gone to, they call it Cheder. But when we moved out of the village that we lived in Russia, we lived in a small village, and my mother had a brother that lived in Astrakhan on the Volga River, the Caspian Sea. And so right after the revolution, he knew that we were having a hard time in the small village that we lived in, that he felt that if he brought us to Astrakhan, that he could help us some way to make a living. So we migrated from a little community called Babinets. I don't even know how you spell it.
What was that near?
What year was that in?
No, what the community that you lived in Russia, what was that near? Was it near any larger city?
Yes, it was close to, at that time, Katerinslav or Riga, Poland. We weren't too far from that area. But then Astrakhan was quite a distance from there. And we came to Astrakhan just 1916, and then the revolution, or 1917, and of course the revolution,
right.
It was 1918.
Yes.
So we had struggling to do, and I, at my age at that time, I was about 9 years old. And my mother and I used to go to the Volga River, get up maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we used to buy fish. And we would carry the fish probably I would say 2 miles, bring it over where we lived, and we would spread out the fish on burlap bags in the morning when, you know, people would go start chopping it, and we would be selling fish. And then right after the revolution was over, of course, we went through starvation. Everybody did. So, of course, if I start telling the whole story, you're going to have a book.
Yeah, what community were you living in when you finally left Russia to come to the United States?
Astrakhan.
You were in Astrakhan?
Yes.
Do you remember much about the passage over here?
Yes, yes.
Perhaps you could touch on that. That's always looked upon as an important event in the life of any immigrant.
I think I ought to tell you a little bit of survival at Astrakhan.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
During the revolution,
Yes.
there was almost impossible to get bread or flour because everything, the buildings were burnt and destruction was every place. And there was a lot of cannibalism going on, people eating humans. And it's almost hard to describe. But I found out that there were farmers had food. They had flour and wheat to sell, but there was no way that they could get it to the market. They had no clothing. They weren't able to buy clothes. So I don't know where I got the information, but I took some clothes, like shirts or dresses or things like that, and I made a little bundle, and I hopped a train with the soldiers, because no one was allowed to move unless you had an emergency or visas. No one could leave town, and I don't think you can even now in Russia, but during the revolution, you had to have papers to move any place. But at my age, I was small in stature, and so I hopped the first trip I made. I crawled in the oil box underneath of the train where they used to keep the oil cans, and I crawled in, and I rode underneath of that train, probably 150 miles. And when I got there, whatever on the train, I felt I was far enough from Astrakhan. I got out, and the soldiers, of course, they were, everybody's good to a kid or a boy or a girl. And so they would feed me and things like that. And I took my bundle, and I got into with the peasants, the farmers, and I traded my clothes for flour. And so how much could I carry? 40 pounds, and probably 30 or 40 pounds. And then I'd work my way back to Astrakhan on another train going the other way. Well, it was very successful, and I did that, I'd say, for about a year and a half. And it was, I know one time I was gone, and my uncle came over to see my mother, and he said that in the paper there was an announcement that they brought 2 carloads of frozen people, and they are at the station if any relatives had been on a trip someplace to go and identify them. And here I was on a trip. Of course, you can imagine what went on, and my mother and my uncle, they went down to the railroad station and checking the corpses to see if they could find me. And the next day, here I come, and when I came home, I wouldn't let my mother let me in the house because I was full of lice. I know what lice are. Yeah. But you could almost shake them off like that. And I had her I undressed in the almost outside of that in a little area, and I had to burn those clothes. They were just absolutely covered with lice, and brushed myself off before I got in the house. But anyway, when food got so you could get food plentiful, we started making cigarettes. So my two sisters, I have two sisters and a brother, and we found out how to make cigarettes, manufacture them. In Russia, they would come in a box, say 200 cigarettes in a box. And if you wanted cigarettes, you didn't buy a pack. You just buy 10 or 20 and put them in cigarette cases. Now they did have them in packs too, but it was mostly the elite used to smoke those. So we started manufacturing cigarettes, which it was illegal. And so I used to peddle them. And then we found out where we could get the carton cigarettes, the packaged ones. And I got arrested one day, and they took me to the police station, pulled out my shirt. Of course, the cigarettes fell. And they sent for my mother. My uncle went over there, and before they came, they threatened to shoot me, and they were going to do it. They wanted to know where did I get those cigarettes. Well, if I would have told them, they probably would have killed those people. So I never did tell them, and at that time, I imagine I was probably maybe 11 years old, 11 years old. And they left. What they were going to do with me, they just let me go. But the next day, I was back out on the street selling cigarettes. It was a matter of survival. Yeah. So, well, anyway, the cigarette business got so it was running down. Everything had periods because they would start manufacture cigarettes, and they were not saleable too good. So one day I wound up on a bazaar, on a market, you know, with and there was another world there. People buying and selling, and the Russian peasants who came in from the farms, and they had woven wool and socks and sweaters. They were selling everything, and people were buying because there were no stores. I mean, most of the stores were burned out. So, and it was really exciting to me to see how much business there was. So the next that I came home, I told my mother, I said, we're going to go to the market, to the bazaar tomorrow, and I want you to go with me, and we're going to sell cigarettes there. So she went with me, and I took a burlap bag, just like the others. They just spread a bag out on the street, and put yourself down, and here you got a stand. So I put her down, and I said, you stay here, and we brought 4 boxes of cigarettes, and I started mixing with the people, and I stopped they call them kulaks, the Russian kulak. I stopped one of them and asked him what he wanted for his, I think he had woven stockings or something, and he told me, and the Russian system, if you ask somebody $10 for something, you say, I'll give you 5. And they bargain, see, back and forth, and they slap the hand, like clamp like this. So I bought those wool stockings from him, and gloves, I don't remember exactly what it was. And I was all excited. That's the first time I ever done that. And you can imagine my age, I was probably no more than maybe 11 or 12 years old at that time. I started back to my mother, going to put them on this burlap, and we're going to sell them, see, for a higher price. before I got to my mother, somebody else stopped me, wanted to know if it's for sale. And I told them it was, and I gave them a price, and they bought it. And I made a profit on it. Well, you can imagine how excited I got, and I go over and I tell my mother I just bought this woolen stockings, and I already sold them, and here how much money I made. Well, she couldn't hardly believe it. Well, that was my beginning in business.
Free enterprise.
Free enterprise, and from then on we started more and more. Here, Butch, now what are you doing over here? Okay.
Fine.
So from the market, we did quite well, and we were able to make a living. And then I found out there was a shortage of bluing, that you wash clothes with. But you could get bluing in Saratov. Saratov was about 300 or 400 miles from Astrakhan. So how do you go to Saratov and you can't get any papers to go? So I decided. Oh, and I also found out that in Saratov there was a shortage of herring and salt. Now, you must understand that Astrakhan was the capital for salt, mines and salt mountains, and that's where they used to make your caviar and the Volga River, and that's where they having all the salt, they could process all the fish and ship it all over the world. So I found out that if I could get a herring over to Saratov, I could sell the herring and buy bluing and bring it back to Astrakhan. So I devised a plan that you could go by train or by water, by boat. So I decided I'd buy 2 bags of herring, and I would say each bag would probably weigh maybe 200 pounds a bag. So I had the bags delivered to the boat, to the dock, and in Russia, the loaders for any kind of a freight, they have carriages. One man probably can carry 500 pounds or more. It's like a saddle they put on. And I decided that I'd catch a loader that had a badge on, and I'd tell them to put those 2 bags on ship. And then I'd worry how to get on. I had no ticket, no passport or anything, which I did. I managed to get the 2 bags of herring on the ship, and then as a family was going through with maybe 4 or 5 kids, I marched right through with them because I was so small and I was just another kid. And I got on ship. I delivered the herring to Astrakhan, and I unloaded them the same way. I got one of those carriers and had them take them off of the ship, and I got off the same way. And I sold the herring right on the dock. I found out where to get bluing, and I bought bluing, and then I worked my way back to Astrakhan by train. And I brought the bluing home, and then I was a big operator with bluing. Nobody else had bluing. So I rationed out some bluing to some of the other merchants in the market, and I put a price on it. They had to sell it for so much a spoon. If they sold it for any less than that, I wouldn't sell them any more bluing. And I imagine maybe half a dozen trips to Saratov, and I got by okay. Well, anyway, that was the experience that we had in Astrakhan. And then we got the final papers that we are going to go to the United States. My dad became an American citizen, and in 1921, the law was if the husband became a naturalized American citizen, and his wife and his children automatically became American citizens. Now that law was changed in 22. So, well, then now we're American citizens living in Russia, and we got papers to go to Montpelier. So we got rid of everything, and we had to go to Moscow. And when we got to Moscow, they wouldn't let my brother out because he was 16 years old. No, I'm sorry, he was 18 years old, and you have to serve in the army for 6 months or a year at that time, and they wouldn't let him out because he didn't serve the army. So they said, you could go, but we'll have to keep him till he has his service. My mother says, no, we're all going to go, or we're going to stay till he can go, and she wouldn't leave him there. So we stayed at a hotel right by a market in Moscow, and we tried to get papers, and the only money that we could get was from, at that time, from Poland. We had an embassy, the United States Embassy was in Poland, but Russia was not recognized by the United States, so all they had was some attaché in Moscow that they could transfer some communications from Poland to Moscow. So we were able to get some money to exist on, and we were stuck in Moscow for about 3 months. Well, while we were in Moscow, what do you do in Moscow? I mean, here was a market, and I was with some experience in business in the market, and I started looking around what could I do to get busy or make some money. And I saw a man selling yeast he had a board with a rope over his neck, and the women would come up, and he would take a string and cut a cube of yeast. It would come in along just like butter, see? And he just cut it, and he'd wrap it in newspapers. The women would buy it to make bread. But he was doing a fantastic business. So I decided to follow him to see where he gets that yeast, which I found out it may not be crooked, but that's business. So I found out where he was buying the yeast, and I went in and I bought the yeast. I fixed myself a board, did the same thing that he did, and that's what we did in Moscow for the last at least 30 days. And then we finally got the clearance papers to go to the United States. And we came to the United States. We did not go through all the rules that an immigrant has to go in because we were American citizens. And so they brought us right in and put us into the railroad station on the boat. They transferred us to the New York Central Station, wherever that is, I don't remember now. And when we got here, here comes a tall man, and he started telling us that he was Mr. Everett Watkins, and he helped my dad to bring us over. Well, we could not understand. We couldn't speak a word of English. He tried to talk to us, and we couldn't communicate. So he goes and he gets an interpreter from a Jewish agency. I think the agency was the Ort. And this interpreter came over with him, and he was telling us who Mr. Watkin was. And of course, we were so scared, they told us if we would talk too much about Russia, that they would probably not even let us into the United States. So we were scared to say anything. And well, anyway, we finally opened up a little bit, and Mr. Watkins, he gave us all a silver dollar, and well, he couldn't do enough for us. He just that man was wonderful. So when we were leaving New York, and we had to go by the way of Columbus, Ohio, to come into Hartford City. Well, every place the train would stop, people would come and bring us presents. See, we didn't know that, but he was writing a story about the Plank family that they just got out of Russia with starvation and all that. I guess we might. So in Columbus, Ohio, they brought us a lot of presents, and there was a couple of Jewish families that wanted to take us to their home and feed us, and well, of course, we wouldn't move. We had tags on us, and we were so really scared. We didn't know who they were, but they were so nice to us, and they paid a young man to go with us on a train clear to Hartford City. And it wasn't necessary because we were tagged. But when we woke up, it was during the night. I guess we got in Hartford City about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And well, this young man was gone. He must have seen us falling asleep, and he got off someplace. And that we really didn't need him. But anyhow, when we got to Hartford City, this agent at the station, he didn't know what to do with us. He couldn't talk to us. We couldn't talk to him. Here he had a bunch of people came in, and he put us in a station, and he was going crazy. And it finally dawned on him that he remembered reading Max Planck. Family was coming. Well, our ticket was saying our Russian name was Plavnik, and he didn't quite interpret that. He couldn't connect it. Till it finally dawned on him that we were the same family. So then he called my dad, and of course he came over and took us, and that's the way we landed in Montpelier in 1922.
So you were reunited. Were there any particular incidents that still stick out in your mind about the trip over from Russia to the United States, as far as the passage is concerned?
Well, the passage, we had a little difficulty in Poland, getting out of Poland to get on ship to go to Germany. And my mother, she was a seamstress when she was a young person, and she developed trachoma in her eyes. I know you know what trachoma is. It's a disease in Russia that a lot of countries have that, and I guess it's contagious. It's very difficult to get in from one country to another in those days. So, but my mother's eyes were cured of trachoma because she used a burning stick, like when you shave, you get a cut. Now they have a lotion, but it used to be they used to have a
septic pencil.
A septic pencil. This was basically what she used on her eyes. She would turn over the lid and smear it and burn out the whatever it was, just like I don't even know too much about it. But anyway, it left scars, and we were afraid if she was examined that she probably wouldn't be able to get in. Now, she didn't have trachoma that was active. It was all cleaned out, but the scars were there. Now, it's almost hard to explain. I had an older brother who was 18, had a sister who was 16. I was 14, and I had another sister that was 12. And then we lost a little girl in Russia. After my dad went away, she died within about 6 months. But I was the leader. Why, I don't know, it just happens like that. But so you had to go to get eye examinations. Well, my father had a sister in Poland. It was Riga, Poland. And that's where we stayed when we got ready till the ship was ready to go. So instead of my mother going to get her eyes examined, I suggested that my aunt go with my mother's passport. She went there and they examined her and they stamped the passport. Because they didn't watch it that close, they didn't look alike. But anyhow, she got passed. Then when we got ready to board the ship, well, there was another problem. You're always scared that somebody knows about what you did was wrong. It's, I guess, people that do wrong things are always skeptical if somebody knows something. But anyway, when we had to get on ship, our passport was we were all on one passport. So I could see what was going on. They were stamping the passport. So I had my mother, and I took one sister with me, and we got in line, and we handed the passport, and they stamped it. So we went through, and then I came back, and I said to the rest of them, I said, come on, you don't have to go through that with you. So I got him on ship. And it's little things like that you remember. And then another thing I remember, after we were on ship, and they gave us, because we were American citizens, so we got a little better quarters than the rest of them. And here comes, what do you call him, a purser or whoever's in charge. Somebody must have slipped him a few dollars, and he wanted to move us out of that room. The men would have to be in one, and women, they didn't let you be together. So we wanted to know why he wants to move my mother and the girls out of this room. And of course, those fellows handling all the refugees or the foreigners, they get pretty hard, and because they probably know that most of them are scared, and he got pretty rough with us, asking him questions of this or that. And we said, well, she's not going to move. If you want to move, you're going to have to go get somebody higher up. And so he says, all right, I'll go get so-and-so. And he went away, and we just took out our citizens' papers and laid them on a bed. When he came back with the officer, whoever he was, and they picked up that citizen's paper, boy, everything was all right. From then on, we were treated with silk gloves.
So being an American had a little more.
Oh, you bet. It certainly was very, very good.
But when you came to America, then you began to get settled. At this time, you were how old? Just to check.
I was 14.
14 years old, and you hadn't had, in an American sense, much formal education.
That's right.
So did you have to begin your education at that time?
Yes. See, my experience in business, at 14, I've already had 5 years' experience in business. And I knew the importance of an education. So we enrolled in Montpelier School. All but my oldest brother, he wouldn't go because he felt ashamed to go in with the kids, little. So that the first enrollment, I was in the first grade, believe it or not, with the tots. Well, then the next day, they moved me in the second grade. And before the season was over, I went through all the grades in that school where I went on Huntington Street in Montpelier. Then the following year, I went to school 2 years, and I went through all but high school would be the 8th grade, all right? 8th grade. And I had real good grades in math, and I was very fortunate that I had good teachers that took patience and helped me and kept me after school and would show me a table with a picture, table, chair, the spelling and the picture, and tie that in like that. And everybody was wonderful, especially in a small community. When you get a strange family like this, then probably never happened anything like that in the whole Montpelier life. So everybody, the teachers and the people too, were very wonderful. So, well, when I got through the semester or school, you call it 8th grade or 10th grade. What do you call the maybe the grades have changed now. I did not go to high school. Is it the 10th grade?
You would have gone through 8, and then you would have had 4 more years of high school.
Okay,
you didn't do that.
So I didn't do that. So I finished the 8th grade, and my dad and I and my brother, we decided we would open up another yard, scrap yard, in Hartford City. So, okay, we got a location, and we were, is that disturbed us? We got a location and made arrangements, and that was while school was out. I was going to go into high school. And my brother and my dad, they got in an argument. You know how young boys are, and he took off for Cleveland, and he met a boy that came to Montpelier. They were strike breakers. There were 2 steel plants in Muncie, Montpelier at that time, and one of the sons of this man that was in charge, he and my brother became good friends, and of course the strike was over and they moved away. So my brother, he just we just opened up the place in Hartford City, and my brother takes off and leaves it. So I was stuck with the business, and I couldn't go back to school.
And how old were you at this time?
At 16.
So you'd had lots of experience in Russia.
Right. So at 16 years old, I was stuck with a business at Hartford City. Well, you know, when you're young, you see girls and you're attracted. Well, excuse me, I'll tell my wife.
So you were talking about how now at the age of 16, you
I met a farmer girl there, and they were a Quaker family, and the whole family were really nice to us, and they lived in a farm. And I used to go out there quite a bit. So when my brother, what do you want?
The leash, which is the, excuse me, the short chain one?
Yeah.
We were with the Quaker family.
They were a Quaker family, and they really, well, they liked that whole family, but I was involved with this little girl a little bit, you know, when you go to school. And so when my brother left the business, and I got stuck with it, and yet I couldn't go back to school because there was nobody to run that place in. Well, Mrs. Kelsey, she was a graduate of Burle College. She and her husband in 1900. Not many people graduated colleges in those days. And they had 3 daughters, and they had 3 sons. So I was going to school with one of the daughters and one of the sons. So when I told them that I couldn't go back to school, Mrs. Kelsey, she actually cried that my father was doing an injustice to me by letting me go into business at this young age and sacrificing an education that I probably would never get. So I made her a promise. I said, now, Mrs. Kelsey, I will get an education some way. And I says, maybe my brother will be back. But anyway, whatever it's necessary, I'll get an education. Well, she says, most cases it doesn't work out like that. Well, her daughter was on a trip. She was a teacher in Wilmington, Delaware for the DuPont's private school. She was an English teacher, and every year she would take a bunch of people to Europe as a tour guide. And she came home during that particular year, and she wasn't feeling too good, so she took a leave of absence for a year not to go back to school. So Mrs. Kelsey insisted that her daughter Ruth teach me while she was home. And that's not the girl that I was interested in at that time. So that's what happened, and I used to drive out in the country about 5 miles after I'd get back from Hartford City, clean up, get something to eat, and I would drive to, it's a mile east of Keystone. It's about 5 miles from where we live, in a Model T Ford. And I'll tell you, many times I went out there, I didn't know I was going to make it. The snow was bad. But I made it. I was determined to get an education. And after that year, and we were in Hartford City 5 years, when we came to Muncie. Well, in the meantime, I developed reading habits where I always would read a lot of things. So when I got to Muncie, I wanted to further my education. So I looked up, there used to be an Emerson private school here. I don't know whether you're in here.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Well, where they just put up this new restaurant on Tillotson. And
Oh, yeah.
there used to be a school in there, Emerson School. So I got a hold of Mrs. Emerson, and I worked out a deal with her that she would teach me at home. And I used to go there twice a week and then once a week. And I went to her home for about 2 years, until she finally kicked me out, and she said, I can't teach anymore.
At the same time, you're working all the time.
Oh, yes, I was working, sure. Oh, yes, that had nothing to do. But I made a promise to Mrs. Kelsey, and I kept my promise. And anyway, this fine lady, she passed away not too many years ago. She was 96 or 7. And this is another personal thing that I've done, that I would say from the time that I met this woman till she died, I never failed. Every year for Christmas, I'd send her a bouquet of flowers, poinsettias. I did it for 40 years. So now you know that I felt that she made a tremendous inroad or contribution to me, that I made her a promise and I didn't break it. And I went over to see her at Earlham. She was at a nursing home for a couple of years, and it just broke my heart to see that she was pretty well crippled up in a wheelchair. But she said, well, I told her I always considered her as my second mother. And she cried and says, well, I always Oh, so proud of you.
Kept your promise.
Yeah.
It's important. Well, now by the late 1920s, then you're in Muncie.
We're in Muncie, 1929.
1929, and you have a business here.
Yes.
That is going well. In 1929, of course, that's the year of the famous
Right.
crash and the beginning of the Depression.
Well, I had a brother with me in business. He passed away about 25 years ago. And so being in business here, we were very, I would say, successful. And I branched out in other businesses. I was in a finance business, and I was in a manufacturing business, and I was in a furniture business, and automobile businesses, and I got hurt some here not too many years ago. You know, as smart as you might think you are, you make mistakes too. But anyway, it's one of those things that have happened. But I thank God my health is good. And while I was doing all that, I didn't forget the fortunate thing that I am an American, that I live in a great country, that the country gave me opportunities, and I gave of myself wherever I could. I served our congregation here. And Mr. Harry Ziegler, an uncle of Sherman Ziegler, we organized a Jewish Welfare Fund, and I was chairman about 4 or 5 times, and I was treasurer for about 25 years. Then I was president of the B'nai B'rith. I was president of our temple, our congregation, for 18 years.
So you've been very active in organizations in the community.
I was also, I served on a mission board for 2 or 3 years. I was co-chairman of the Muncie Red Cross, and I was chairman of the Muncie Red Cross, and went to Washington to see President Eisenhower. He made a speech, and they had a convention there for the Red Cross. And I worked on the United Fund many times, and I also was working on a drive for Ball State when they were putting up the auditorium. And I gave money like everybody else had to give, but besides that, it's not what you give yourself so much as how much you can get other people to give.
Yeah, the secret of raising money.
Right, so I was always there when I was needed. And then the other thing that I did with all that, the community here had one country club, the Delaware Country Club. They would not accept Jews as members. So I felt that there should be a place where a Jewish person could belong, or if he wanted to play golf. And my wife's cousin, Mrs. Stant, her husband, Morton Stant, that had the Stant Jewelers here, he was a golfer, more interested in golf than I was. And we were talking one day, and an opportunity developed itself that Green Hills Farms, where Arthur Ball owned at one time about 800 acres, was up for sale, and I got the call on it from a real estate man, and I picked up Morton Stant and Ben Hertz. He's the man that owns the Midwest Laundry. And we drove out to Green Hill Farms, and before we left that afternoon, we bought 147 acres of the lodge and a home and the ground. we built that country club. And I can say that I spent 6 months, the first year, almost living out there, building, supervising, buying, raising funds. And I enjoyed doing it. And it wasn't a Jewish country club because we don't have enough Jews. This was done for the community to have another country club. And I went out and I could say that I raised personally probably 50% of the money that went into that club.
It's a great accomplishment.
And I got money from non-Jews as well as Jews, people like the president of the banks and all the industry people. They didn't turn me down. So, and I was the first president of Green Hills, and I was treasurer for 20 years. And I felt that that was enough. And unfortunately, Green Hills was just sold.
Yeah, I noticed that in the paper.
That just broke my heart because it shouldn't have been done. It was $1 million plant sold for about $300,000. And they couldn't, something was wrong. They couldn't run it. But just no leadership. But anyway, I felt I made my contribution, and it's a beautiful place. And I don't know if you've ever been out there.
Yes, I have. I've been to dances out there and Cardinal varsity activities out there.
Yes, and I'm very proud of Green Hills. And anyway, I also, when I was president of our Bethel Temple, I instituted the Jewish Institute on Religion for about 10 or 11 years. And I would had all the ministers from the county and the surrounding counties and invite them to our temple. And I would bring in an outstanding speaker, a professor from the Hebrew Union College or some outstanding rabbi. I remember bringing one in from St. Louis and one from Chicago, and would have a seminar where the ministers had a chance to ask questions, and he'd lecture. And I used to participate the whole day with them. The sisterhood would have a luncheon. We'd start at 10 and break out for lunch, and then from 1 to 4 o'clock. And it was a very interesting program. And I was doing that basically for breaking down prejudice. As you probably are aware that this community was a hotbed at one time for the Ku Klux Klan. And we had a man used to write the X-ray paper called Cord Asher. So the thing that I was doing, I felt that if we can open the door to see that the Jews are human beings, they want the same thing everybody else wants, that if we can learn from each other, we could live better together. And I think it really worked because Delaware Country Club takes in Jews, the Muncie Club takes in Jews, and the Jews at one time were not able to buy home or land in like Westwood or even Kenmore, places like that. It was restricted. I mean, when I say restricted, it was you couldn't buy it. But now you can. So I feel that all the things that was done in the last, say, my period that I was trying to be active, that I think it helped cement relationship between the Jews and the non-Jews and a better understanding.
How much social life has there been in your years in Muncie within the Jewish community? Is there quite a bit or not?
Well, yes, I would say years ago was much better than it is now. And I think when we're talking about the social life, mostly the group, our own group would get together and they would socialize with either cards or dinners or dances, something like that. But now, we have a little different type of group of people in the Jewish people here. Where at one time we had, like Mort Pazel said, you could walk down Walnut Street and probably meet all the Jews. Well, that has changed now. You don't have the merchants on the street because all those merchants are gone, basically. There are not many of them left. The children, very few of them stayed here. They migrated to bigger cities, and they didn't follow the father's business. So today we have like the faculty from Ball State, we have some manufacturers, we have a few people here and there, and I think, and not to discredit the Jews before, but I think we have a higher educated, better educated group now than we had then. Because of that, when I came to Muncie, there were a lot of people here like my father. My father was a nice man, but as far as an education, a formal education or a college education, he didn't have. He was, in his own way, he was a scholar as far as Jewish things, Hebrew and things like that. But American way of living, or education type, we didn't have too many at that time. But you're getting a different class now. They're more, let's say, more modernized, more Americanized. And
well, they don't have that. Burle, we're talking when the last tape ended about your thoughts on the relationship over the past several decades in this community between the Jews and the non-Jews. I wonder if you could comment on that at all.
Well, my relationship with the non-Jews has been very good in this community. I had business associates, and I was involved, as I said before, on the community level and on various projects. I always had good cooperation, and I never felt any anti-Semitism or any basic, embarrassment because of my religion or being Jewish.
And yet you were certainly aware, as you commented a few moments ago, about the existence of discriminatory practices.
Well, that I was objecting to it because this is something that has developed probably prior to my coming to Muncie. There must have been some reason for that, and I can't, never did know or found out why those discriminatory things were in effect. So something had to happen in the past, that maybe some Jewish person did something wrong, and you establish hatred or of course you go back into history of the Jews. They've been persecuted for many centuries, maybe for no reason at all, just some jealousy or well, sometimes you can't even find a good reason why, because they're Jews. But I feel that what I did, and the people that helped me, and people like Marty and Bernard Friend, and I would say of all the Jews in the community, there was only a few people that you could count on that would cooperate with you and help you in any program that would benefit the community. You couldn't get everybody to even think the same way that you're thinking. But basically, I think that's the way everything works in this country. It takes a few people to sort of start the ball rolling.
So you learn very quickly who the people are you can count on.
Right.
How about your family? Do you consider your family to be a very religious family as far as observance is concerned?
Well, my mother and father were strictly Orthodox. They actually observed the Orthodox tradition. My father never worked on a Saturday all his life that he lived in this country. Saturday he would close his business on Friday night, and he wouldn't open it till Sunday morning. And my mother, the same way. She kept kosher at, you know what I'm talking about kosher foods. And she would get her meats from Indianapolis. And when they lived in Montpelier, she used to get it out of Fort Wayne. So all her life and my dad's life, they were strictly observing the Orthodox tradition of Judaism. Now and I'd say the rest of the family except one sister, my oldest sister, she followed the pattern of my mother and father. They lived in Muncie, and her husband worked for us for over 40 years. They too observed the kosher tradition, but they would eat outside meat that's non-kosher, but at home it was always kosher. My dad and mother, they would not eat meat outside. When I say outside, I mean in a restaurant or places like that. They would probably order something made out of milk or cheese or eggs or something like that. They would not eat meat that was not kosher. But I took the position that, to be honest with myself, I could not keep kosher because I'm involved in business. I have to go out to eat with business people, and if I was stick to a kosher diet or adhere to a Sabbath at working on Saturday, well, there's a lot of things you couldn't do. My dad did all those things that was necessary, but I felt that I couldn't do it, and I also felt that if I didn't do them, that didn't mean that I was a good Jew, that I was doing my part in another way that was probably compensating my Judaism. And not only that, as you might be aware, that we have the conservative Jews besides the Orthodox, and we have the Reformed Jews. Well, my wife happens to belong to a Reform. One of her parents, they were also strictly Orthodox. But I felt that the Reformed Judaism fitted into my picture, a way of life. And I was fortunate that my wife also felt the same way. So therefore, we never kept kosher. We did everything that everybody else did. We drive on Saturday. You're not allowed to ride in the car or turn on the lights or anything. Well, it'd be impossible for me to live out here if I couldn't drive a car. But anyway, we reform, and I think we're good Jews as far as Judaism goes. We work for the Jewish cause, and we also work for the community cause, or wherever we are. We feel that we're Americans, and we have to pay taxes like everybody else, and this is a great country, and anything that's necessary to do, we do it. And religion is something else, and I find that, and my wife both, that we find that Reform Judaism fits into our way of life. And we feel very strongly about Reform Judaism. I think that the future of Judaism in this country is setting the pattern by Reform movements. Now, whether that's, maybe Israel's going to turn that around, but basically the leaders, I think in this country, the Jewish leaders, I think come from Reform Judaism.
Has Zionism been important as far as your own?
No, it has not. Not to me. I at one time was a Zionist member for a year or two. my wife's family, they belonged to the Zionists. Well, it's just like belonging to a lodge organization. But it has never, as far as I'm concerned, it has never interfered with my life either way. And if you know anything about the Zionist movement, they believe in Israel, and I do too. And I don't have to be a Zionist. As a Jew, I feel that just like an Irishman, he may come from Ireland, but he doesn't want to go live there, but he wants to see Ireland survive as a government or a country. Or in other words, you need some roots someplace. And I think that Israel is an important thing for the Jews in the world. They have been pushed around for a couple thousand years. They finally got some roots established in Israel, and I think that they will make a great contribution to civilization in that little part of the country to help the Arabs while they're fighting. The Arabs are fighting them, but in the long run, the Arabs will benefit an awful lot from Israel. And we certainly, this country, again, I'm speaking political now a little bit, that the United States has a great ally by having Israel over there, especially with the oil, and now with the troubles with Iran and some of the other countries, and they know that Israel they can depend on. And,
switch back from an international perspective a little bit to a more local one, and that is a question that I plan to ask all of the individuals I interview as part of this oral history project. Namely, as you look back over time and also look ahead into the future, what do you think is the future of the Jewish community in Muncie, Indiana?
Well, I personally think as long as there will be a Muncie, there will be a Jewish community. It may get a few less people and they'll grow again, but Muncie has something to offer as a community. It's a good business town, and we got a lot of industry here, and there's no reason why a Jew couldn't come here and be part of the community and make a living and live here. Now, maybe if I had children, we do not have children. We'll be married 40 years next month. And maybe if I had children, I might think differently. But we certainly enjoy Muncie, and I feel that this is my home, the community, and anything I was able to do for Muncie, I tried. But there's no reason for any Jew that comes here, and if he wants to be part of the community and give of himself, that he can't make a nice living here and have his base here and go wherever he wants to, but you always have to come back someplace. So, sure, we have some of the other families, like, well, you take the Pazels, that's a good example. Their parents came here, the boys stayed here. Their sons and daughters have moved away from Muncie. They married somebody else or went here and there, and a lot of them have done that. But we get new ones, and we get some of the old ones that are sticking around, and there's no reason why they should leave. Not because, look, we have Jewish communities in this country. Well, like Montpelier, there was only two or three Jewish families, and they made a living and they stayed there. They were well respected in the community, and so they wanted to go for the religious services. They used to drive to Marion, Indiana. We used to go to Fort Wayne. My parents used to go or Indianapolis, and but your home is where you make a living. So I think the religious aspect, if you're a Jew and you're associating with a non-Jew, if you are the right person and have respect for his religion as much as you have your own, there's really not too much trouble.
How about your business? I mean, here you are, the second generation of a business that's been very, very successful. What will happen to this business in the next generation?
Well, in my situation, it may be unfortunate because I have no heirs to take over my business. I say I don't have heirs. I have a nephew that was my brother's son that was born here in Muncie. My brother passed away. The son has an interest in the business, but he never comes. He's not interested at all. He's a musician in San Francisco. I tried many times to get him to come down, but I haven't been successful. Well, he has two sons. Maybe far-fetched. And I'm hopeful that maybe one of the two sons that he has might want to come in here someday and take a look, and maybe I could get him interested. But if not, I look at it from another point of view. I only live for today. I do the best I can. I'm building a business. Now, when my time comes and I have to leave this world, somebody will buy it, whether he be a relative or a friend or a stranger. And if the business is successful, it'll go on. And if it's not, well, then new blood will come in, and they'll run. There's always going to be somebody going to buy cars, wrecked cars, junk cars, whether Burle Plank is here or not. So you just do what you can today. And in my lifetime in Muncie, I've employed a lot of people. I've had people work for me for 30 and 40 years. Apparently, I treat them fairly well, or they wouldn't stay. They raise families. And some of them die, some of them move away, and some of them go to my competitors. But I always treated them and fair, I thought, and try to treat them as equals, not anything above myself. And so when I'm gone and there's nobody to pick up the pieces, that's it.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add as a kind of final summary comment? I think you've done that at many places along the line during our conversation and done it very well, but perhaps there might be something that occurs to you that you might wish to add.
Well, the only thing I could add more probably to what we were talking here, personally I think Muncie is a good community. I feel that wherever you live, if you are part of a community, then you are a happier person because your community is your home. And the other thing is, we live in a great country. We have a great system of democracy. Sometimes it looks like it's going down the drain, but it's still a wonderful system that gives a foreigner like myself that can come to this country and be taken in and give me the opportunity to see what I can do with my experience from Russia, or knowledge, or what, or how hard a man wants to work to get someplace. This country provides that. And I think with that, you could say that there's not many places in the world that you can do that. And we should be very grateful for that.
I don't know of too many. Thank you very much, Burle. This is Warren Vanderhill, Oral History project interview number 2, speaking with Burle Plank.
Ah.